You have four guys who are 210 or 220 pound guys jumping in a sled, the size of a bathtub. You have to jump in together and then get in an aerodynamic position.
So strong, fast, look good in suit, agile, and bendy.
Are you interested? That's my question. Do you fit that description?
This is the Gies Download, a podcast from the University of Illinois' Gies College of Business. I'm your host, Tim Sinclair, and today my guest is former Olympic bobsledder and recent Gies MBA graduate, Brock Kreitzburg. As an athlete, Brock was quite familiar with the need for speed and agility and strength. But once his career in sport was over, Brock quickly learned that similar traits could be valuable in the working world too. And whether it be bobsledding or business, both took an awful lot of hard work. So I'm interested how one gets into bobsledding at all. Like in junior high and high school, you can join the swim team or the basketball team or play football. There, at least no high school I've ever been to, has a bobsled team. So how does one jump from just being an athlete to being that type of an athlete?
Well, I played football growing up through high school, college, and was in minicamp with Tampa Bay. And I wound up not being signed by the NFL team and wound up going to grad school 20 years ago for another degree. And, I had an itch to compete again. It's in your blood. You compete for so long, you want to do it again. And so I started to train to get back into football. Well, the facility I was training at, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. The bobsled team was training with the same type of facility in Salt Lake City. So they did a 3 or 4 month recruiting process where they brought athletes in and cut athletes, and out of that came 3 of us. I mean, there are very few bobsledders in the world, and unless you live by one of the bobsled tracks, there's 4 of them in North America, you're probably not going to be inclined to pursue, that sport.
So what's required? Obviously, you need to be strong and fast. And I would imagine it might depend on what part of the bobsled you are sitting in, whether you're driving or not. What are some of the things they were looking for that you brought to the table?
It's a second sport for most athletes, and most of them either played football or track. I ran track and field. And so you have to be fast, you have to be powerful and explosive. That's for the push athletes, because in a bobsled, there's 4 guys. There's 2 or 4 guys, depending on what you're doing, discipline. But the driver is, he's in the front. That takes a lot of technical skill that's learned over time, many, many years. But as a push athlete, you can learn how to do that fairly quickly. I mean, I was recruited, and within the first several months of learning how to bobsled, I was on the national team. So I just had those qualities that they were looking for in a bobsledder, and you had to be strong. Also you have to be fairly fit. You wear a full body speed suit, and it can be humbling if you're not in good shape. So those are, some people have those characteristics and some people don't. Some may have one or the other, but they don't have like them put together where, you have to push this 500-pound sled on ice, as fast and as hard as you can for 5 seconds. And then, you have 4 guys who are 210 or 220 pound guys jumping in a sled, the size of a bathtub, maybe a little bit bigger. You have to jump in together and then get in an aerodynamic position. So you take some athleticism as well to do that.
So strong, fast, look good in suit, agile, and bendy.
Are you interested? That's my question. Do you fit that description?
You know what? Other than the bendy, I probably could have pulled it off maybe 15 years ago, but I'm not sure I'm qualified anymore.
Well, it's never too late. They do recruit athletes every year.
Yeah,
I have
not
a connection.
43-year-old athletes, I wouldn't think.
Well, I don't know. Never say never.
So at what point do you realize that, obviously within a few months you're on the national team, you realize you're pretty good. Do you start to have aspirations that you never thought you might have at that point for Olympics and world championships and things?
Yeah, certainly. I always wanted to be in the NFL, and but obviously that didn't work. And so as I start to realize like I'm pretty good, and then you start focusing your eyes on the Olympics. And there are athletes who train for years, for decades to be in the Olympics. And so as a bobsledder, those athletes have been working their craft, whether it's football or track, for decades as well. And so with bobsledding, you can take that type of training and redirect it to bobsledding. So you have the strength and the power. You just have to learn the technical aspect of pushing a bobsled. And so, as it gets closer, year after year, the Olympics are getting closer, and you're starting, I was starting to compete in world championships thinking this is a real possibility that I could make the Olympics. But, in bobsledding, it's a team sport, but each person can be replaced at any time. So, you're competing on a team, but it's very, very much like you're competing for your spot. And so you could, if you're not performing well that week, the next week you could be removed. And so you're always, you're only as good as your last race in bobsledding as a push athlete.
So, and maybe I'm making something out of nothing here, and I want to hear the story from you. But as I was reading up on your career, I noticed that when you were running with USA 2,
mm-hmm.
and Steve Holcomb was the driver, correct?
Correct.
Then you either lost that spot or were removed from that spot, and I don't know what he has to do with it or not, but then later you got good, jumped up to USA 1, and then when he was driving USA 1 a few years later, he's like, oh yeah, this guy's pretty good, I want him to come back. Was that as awkward as it seems on paper?
No, it's kind of the bobsledding world. And so the year before the games for the World Championships, the coaches and Steve had felt I wasn't pushing well, so I was actually removed from World Championships. So I didn't compete on his team, and that was devastating, right? Because usually whoever's on the World Championship, World Cup team, for World Championship team for the previous year, they have a very good chance of making the Olympic team. So it was like, my aspirations of making the Olympics may not happen. So that was devastating, but it's also a turning point of like, I've got to change some things in what I'm doing, my training, my diet. I've got to be more disciplined because I do not want this to happen again next year. And so I didn't compete with him. The following year, again, he put me back on his team. I was pushing well, but I was pushing so well Olympic year that was USA 2. About a month and a half before the Olympics, I was pushing so well, I was promoted to USA 1, which was a big deal because we were, USA 1 was ranked number 1 in the world. We were predicted to win a gold medal. In the Olympics prior in 2002, the driver had won a silver medal. So now it's like, okay, now I'm not just talking about the Olympics. I'm talking about like we were a medal contender.
However, as any Olympian will tell you, there's a huge difference between being a medal contender and a medal winner.
There's so much pressure going in anticipation of making the Olympic team. And then once you make it, it's like then your eyes turn to winning a medal. And so you can start to feel the pressure, but also almost taste a gold medal, right? And so, I'm watching the Olympics now. I have 4 kids, so I'm watching them, and I was watching the opening ceremonies, and it almost brought me to tears because it's such an incredible and once in a life. Well, depending on what athlete you are, but it's like for me, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity that I had to walk in the opening ceremonies representing the United States of America. I was one of 211 athletes at that time to represent on the Winter Olympic team, and I was one of 7 athletes on the U.S. bobsled team. So it was an incredible, incredible experience. And we were predicted to win a gold medal, and unfortunately, we just didn't perform when the race came, when we finished 7th. And so that was just kind of devastating, right? You're at the top of the athletic world. There's high expectations, and then you don't win. And then all the attention that you had, because, the Olympics is a focal point in sports at that time, then no one really cares anymore because the Olympics are over. And so you kind of go through this wave of emotion during the Olympics, but it's something that I would not trade for anything in the world. And I was so blessed and fortunate to be a part of that.
Yeah, the phrase is, what is it? Let your praise be as loud as your criticism. And I would
Yeah.
imagine in your situation, it may have a little bit gone the other way. You had a whole lot of praise going in, but with that comes criticism on the other side. And how do you deal with that? Do you shut yourself off from those things? Do you let yourself sort of live in it for a little while? How does a human sort of take all that in and come out okay on the other side?
Yeah, it's hard. Even as I watch the Olympics now, there are athletes who have there's high expectations and then they don't perform. And with myself, it was, you live in it for a while and you try to process it and deal with it. But I think the important part is what you do with it. Do you live in it too long where it becomes depressing, or do you use it as motivation? Use it as motivation the next year, the next squad to get better, to remember everything leading up to the Olympics and what you did to not perform as well as you had. And so you're continuing to use that as fuel to be the best in the world, to be an elite athlete and be better than what you were before.
Learning to cope with disappointment isn't the only struggle for most Olympic athletes. Brock told me that finding a way to make ends meet financially is a big concern too.
I would say 90% of the athletes struggle for funding. Most of the athletes will. Some athletes work a job in order to finance their training, which is. If you're not an athlete, that makes sense. You have to work. But, when I was an athlete, I was training 6 days a week, 3 to 6 hours a day. And just wasn't going to the gym and lifting some weights and then going home. It was like 2.5 hours at the track, sprinting, bounding, and then going to the gym for another 2.5 hours and lifting weights. And you're exhausted. You just completely, put all the energy that you have into that training. And so you need to go home and rest and recover. But if you're working another job or you're doing something else, that's hard to do. So, you see all of the medal contenders and you see, a very small percentage of people who are featured during the Olympics, and there is a small percentage that they benefit financially, but the majority of them, struggle to provide for themselves and to be able to, a place to stay, training expenses, food, and it's just like they're scraping together a way to make the Olympics, to make the national team and make the Olympics, but then to represent the United States. Everything is funded really individually in the off season for training.
Did I see you were working with Home Depot for a while throughout your career?
I was. And so they had a program. It was called the Olympic Job Opportunity Program. And what Home Depot did was you would work part-time hours in the off season and they would pay you a full-time salary. So quite honestly, that is the only reason I was able to compete at the level I did. I was able to train at the level. I didn't work a full-time job. I just went in when my schedule allowed me. And then, kind of at late 2000s, the market kind of wasn't doing well, if you remember. And so they ended that program. It just wasn't financially feasible for them any longer.
I would imagine those little orange wheelie carts for the 2x4s, you probably push those faster than anyone, right?
Yeah, but, I worked in the paint department. And so
really,
I did. I didn't know a whole lot of. I often would say, "Let me check with my colleague on that." And I would go. I was really good at mixing paint, pushing some buttons and mixing it. But the technical aspect of painting, that wasn't my thing.
I think they missed an opportunity to have you pushing the orange wheelie carts, but that's just me. What's the deal with NASCAR? How did that happen?
Well, it's an interesting story. So I made the Olympic team in 2006. I had a hip injury in 2008, wound up having 2 hip surgeries. And I miss going back to the Olympic to the games. And so the team that I had been sliding with, actually Steve Holcomb, they wound up making winning the gold medal. So I'm really excited for them. They're my brothers, and we spent a lot of time sacrificing to get to the Olympics, but also kind of devastated. And so I had to figure out what I was going to do next. And so I had tried my hand at being a jackman for NASCAR, and I had a friend of mine who was he was a NASCAR driver, and so he took me through some training, and it was a really cool experience. The guys are very athletic, and I appreciated the amount of time when a car would pull in and they'd have to run around the car, jack it up, take the wheels off, put them back on, put the tires back on, and then go again, take off again. I played around with that, but ultimately it didn't. I didn't pursue that. I tried my hand. I was a stuntman in Los Angeles for about a year and a half, but I just came to a point where with being an athlete, I was investing in my body, and I was on a set of a TV show that I was working on. I'm thinking, I'm doing the same thing that I was doing as an athlete. As an athlete, I'm investing in my body. Now I'm investing in my bank account. And, I said, at the end of my life, do I want my legacy to be that I've only invested in myself? And that was a real turning point for me. I decided I wanted to pursue a career in investing in something else or someone else.
That leads to your education with Illinois, specifically in the Gies College of Business. I understand you're a fairly recent graduate there. Congratulations on that. What led to that decision, and what did you hope that your time with Gies was ultimately going to afford you that you didn't have beforehand?
I graduated last spring, so thank you. It was a fantastic journey. It exceeded my expectations of what I thought going into the program. And as I retired from sport, I thought I had a lot of transferable skills, which I did. Teamwork, discipline, so forth. But I didn't know how to be a leader. I didn't know anything about leadership, and I wound up working the last 10 years. I've worked in the humanitarian world, and I found myself about a year and a half later, after retiring from sport, I was living in South Sudan in East Africa, and I ran a food program. I worked for an organization called Samaritan's Purse, and I ran a food program for 60,000 refugees every month that came over from the border from Sudan into South Sudan. And I remember a specific moment. I was just hired to do that. I flew in. You fly in the middle of the bush. You land on a dirt runway. These all the grass huts, and so you drive to your compound. But in any case, my first meeting with my team, they were South Sudanese and expats, and I thought to myself, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how to lead these people. I can go by intuition, but I didn't have much experience doing that. And that began a journey for me of being a learner, right? Of just trying to, I lived in the middle of the bush in a refugee camp. There wasn't much internet there, so books I could buy and bring back. I started to learn more about leadership, but it wasn't meeting what I needed. And it came to a point where I just wanted to be a better leader and decision maker. And I did a lot of research on different programs that are available to help me to do that. And I came upon on Gies, and it checked every box. I had a leadership component. It was completely online because I was traveling a lot, and it was affordable. And it just equipped me with the tools that I was looking for in order to be a leader and to lead my team well, and to make good decisions for the organization that I was working for.
Brock's degree from Gies not only taught him the things he wanted and needed to learn, but set him up for a job he knows he's perfect for.
I'm the executive director of Summit Missions International, and we're a Christian organization that partners with churches and leaders to provide practical help and spiritual hope across Eastern Europe, really, so people can hear about God's love for them through Jesus Christ. And this is a big leadership role. And so, part of my responsibility is fundraising. So looking at what I learned in marketing of like, who is my target audience? How do I reach them? Is that the correct channel to do so? I could list probably, half a dozen courses, strategic management. We looked at our mission and vision and what value we bring and the problem we solve and what's our competitive advantage. Not that we're making money, but there are many faith-based humanitarian organizations. Like, how do we differentiate ourselves from them? And of course, financially, not only understanding balance sheets, income and cash flow statements, but then making decisions from that understanding. So it's just like, I wanted to use my experience at Samaritan's Purse, but then my education through my MBA, everything that I learned, I wanted to use it to invest in a small but growing Christian organization. Because, you have so much going on, you're pushing each initiative forward. And so whether it's fundraising or looking at the financial statements or looking at our strategy, relooking at our mission, it's like, yes, that's right. I remember studying that. I remember diving deep into that. Let me go and pull those, the frameworks that I have. Man, it's so many frameworks that I love using in my current position.
Whether it's training his body to be ready for a bobsled run or training his mind to be ready for a business venture, Brock Kreitzburg has been willing to put in the necessary work. In his job today, Brock is still agile and quick on his feet. He's just wearing a very different kind of suit. Be sure to join us for the next Gies Download. In the meantime, you can learn more about the Gies College of Business at giesbusiness.illinois.edu.